Have you always wanted to craft the perfect tagline and elevator pitch for your business so that you can tell people exactly what your business is up to and they get it and they're excited to buy from you? Well, if that is you, then you'll want to stay tuned for this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, because that is what we're going to dive into today. This is episode number 409, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/409. Let's dive in, because this is a juicy one. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Okay, so this podcast episode is going to be a lot shorter than you think, because when it comes to creating the perfect tagline and elevator pitch for your business, it doesn't actually exist. Have a think about the taglines of businesses that first come to mind when you think of very famous taglines. The one that I think of is "Just Do It" from Nike. Does it tell you anything about the product? Does it tell you anything about the business really? That doesn't actually express the value proposition of buying Nike products. It doesn't tell you anything about the quality of their products, about the transformation that they facilitate. It has no information or insight in it whatsoever. It's just catchy. It's just a tagline. And so when it comes to creating a message that people really deeply understand and talking about your business in a way that people will buy from you and be excited to spend money with you, you cannot rely on a tagline to do all of that heavy lifting for you. Similarly, when it comes to an elevator pitch, which is literally if you are in an elevator with someone, in the time that it takes for you to get to your floor, how do you explain your business? That elevator pitch would be very different if you stepped into an elevator with me versus stepping into an elevator with someone who is your ideal client versus stepping into an elevator with some random stranger versus stepping into an elevator with Oprah versus stepping into an elevator with Richard Branson versus stepping into an elevator with one of the sharks from Shark Tank. In all of those situations, the part of your business that you're most likely going to need to focus on in order to get their attention is going to be different. And so therefore, you need different components to your message that you can use in different situations. That is an entire messaging ecosystem. So for a lot of people, they get very focused and fixated on, I need the right tagline, I need the right business name, I need the right elevator pitch, I need the right one sentence explainer of what my business is about. And when I ask them, well, where are you going to share that? If they say, well, anywhere, then we actually have a problem, because the way that you explain your business on your Facebook page is very different to the way that you would introduce your business if you were standing up and speaking at an event, which again is very different to the way you would introduce yourself at a networking event, which again is very different to the way that you would explain your business if you had the opportunity to pitch to an investor. And so if you're looking for a one sentence explainer of your business because you've got a podcast interview coming up, my question would be, well, who are the main listeners of the podcast? What are your goals for that podcast? What is it that you're hoping to achieve as a result of being on that podcast? Okay, well, through that lens, now we're going to craft a way for you to introduce your business that makes sense and resonates there. It would also make sense to make sure that the topic that you're speaking about is reflected in the way that you introduce yourself in your business as well. So if I'm going on a podcast to talk about communities and building an audience, I'm going to, in my introduction of myself, talk about my Facebook community. If I'm going on to a podcast to talk about events, I'm going to include talking about my conference in my introduction on that podcast. So even to be on a podcast, there's no one introduction. There's no one job title. There's no one tagline. And the more that you focus and fixate on finding the one line or the one phrase that sums you up and sums up your business and sums up exactly what it is that people might buy from you, the less effectively you'll be able to attract and convert ideal clients. because you're so focused on making it make sense for everyone, it ends up making sense to no one. It ends up either being very vague and mysterious, like just do it, which explains nothing, or it ends up being so shiny and sparkly that every single word needs to be defined and explained along the way, or it becomes so long and unwieldy and like it ends up just being like a babbling mess of words and no one can keep up with you. So instead of getting all fixated on finding the perfect tagline or crafting the perfect elevator pitch, I instead want you to start with your core message. And that core message is the foundation of your messaging ecosystem, but it in itself is not a one-sentence thing. It is your niche decisions behind the scenes about who it is that you're focused on with your marketing, your value proposition through multiple angles and layers, and the bridge that you need to bridge people across who are your ideal clients so that they understand the gap between what they think is the way to achieve their goal and what you know is actually the most effective way for them to achieve their goal. Now, if all of that sounds a little bit overwhelming and you're like, how do I break this down? How do I get this created? Well, lucky for you, in the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/409, you'll find my core messaging document template. And in that, it walks you through mapping out these key foundations of your messaging ecosystem. Once you've got those three things complete, your niche, your value proposition, and your bridge, then when you create content and offers and you go out and share tips and you go out and talk on the internet and you go out and introduce yourself to new people, you will bring forward different elements of those foundations depending on context. So once you have that core messaging in place, then you will be able to apply that core messaging in those different contexts in the most effective way. That is what a messaging ecosystem is recognizing that the way you explain your work to an informed potential client who's told you they're interested in working with you is very different to the way that you explain what your business is about to a stranger that you just met on the internet. So hopefully this has helped you to kind of calm down and ease back on needing to find that one perfect tagline or elevator pitch. And instead, you can relax knowing that if you develop a messaging ecosystem that's built on solid messaging foundations, you are far more likely to know how to introduce yourself with context and ensure that you are hitting those key foundational points that are relevant out of your core message for that particular context. So have a look at the core messaging template that's available with the show notes of today's episode, tashcorbin.com/409, and have a play with sharing content and sharing about your business and about your offers and your work through that contextualized lens in the different situations and scenarios that crop up for you over the next few weeks. And I am sure you will see it's far easier, there's far less pressure on it, and you stop actually trying to summarize yourself in a sentence, because inevitably, if you try and sum yourself up in 7 words, you will undersell yourself, you'll undersell your business, because there is so much depth to what you do. There's so much depth to who you are. There's so much depth to what it is that you offer. How on earth do you expect to capture your magic, your awesomeness, the awesomeness of your business in 7 words? That's such a silly pursuit when we think about it, because ultimately you are far more than 7 words could ever capture about you. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.